Jim, I've picked like the past 2 or 3 calls. You want to pick one?
41 sounds interesting.
I was looking at 41 as well. Okay, so this is James from Ohio, no pronouns given, who wants to say that there is physical evidence of God, specifically talking about archaeologists discovering Sodom and Gomorrah and evidence of other places in the Bible existing. James, how are you today?
I'm doing okay. How are you?
I'm all right,
Doing
man.
good.
Never had a bad day. Never had a bad day. So, you said that there's physical evidence of God, and you're talking about archaeological evidence of places in the Bible. Is that the exact? Is that synonymous? Are you saying that the archaeological evidence of the Bible is evidence for God, or what do you mean by that?
Yes, sir. There is multiple proof evidence of exact locations that are mentioned in the Bible. For somebody to say that God is false when it was prophesied about these locations, it was prophesied about, the ark. Ark was found. It was prophesied about Jacob's well. It was found. Prophesied about Sodom and Gomorrah. They actually found, with sulfur, it actually, the makeup of it, it was actually found, the location. So these are all true events. If God did not exist, then why are these events there? Why are these places there? That does not make sense.
Let me answer that with a question of my own. Does the fact that Spider-Man takes place in New York and the Spider-Man comics all use real places proof that Spider-Man exists?
Well, here, let me say, no, but here's the thing. So the kind of, as far as Sodom and Gomorrah, what they found, that was not something that man could have made. That was only a supernatural event that God could have done.
That's the claim.
God could have done.
Couple things. I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but there's a couple of things. First of all, I want to make it very clear that like the things you've talked about here, as far as Sodom and Gomorrah and the sulfur in the ground, as far as finding the ark and things like this, I have heard these things before. You're not going to believe me, and that's fine. I'm just putting it out there that those things are not true. These are falsified claims by fake archaeologists who are trying to put in the Bible. It's bullshit. These things have not been found, and they're not real. But I just want to get that out of the way. Even if they were, okay, let's say, for example, that these things were real, which again, can't stress enough how much they're not. If these were real, how would that prove a God and not just prove that a story happened? When the Euphrates River flooded and lots of cultures around that river wrote about a flood story, that's not the same thing as a global flood, even though there was a minor little flood here, right? So if we can find this civilization that had some weird ass event and the people wrote about it, does that prove the rest of the other crazy claims in the Bible? Or does it prove there's some truth to maybe this one story and the rest of it's probably bullshit?
Well, so here's the thing. I mean, I heard part of what you're saying, but the thing is it was more than just one thing. And not only that, but if it wasn't important, if the Bible was never important, why would it have lasted thousands of years?
That's not the claim you're making.
So many people.
We can absolutely address that in a second. I would love to touch about that. Please, before the end of this call, remind me of that, because that's a really important question. But I don't want to go that way right now. I want to stick to what you said in the beginning. Like, even if we could prove that like one or two of the events in the Bible was kind of true, does that prove the rest of the supernatural claims? Take, for example, what Jim said about Spider-Man. If there was an event in a Spider-Man comic where some crazy thing happened at the Chrysler building and this and that and the other, and we can show the buildings there and we can show evidence of these different things, does that make the rest of the comic book true? Like, let's say the comic book referenced 9/11. We have plenty of evidence for 9/11. Does that mean that the comic book is true because it had this event and this place in it?
No, but that's a building, though. That's a building. There's buildings everywhere.
The city of Sodom and Gomorrah, those are buildings, right? They're just a collection of buildings make a city. So, like, that's the thing is that there's a bunch of claims in the Bible. There's a bunch of claims in the Bible. Even if you could prove one of them, that doesn't do anything to prove the rest of them. It's like saying that, I can prove that Jesus was real, therefore the Bible's real. You have to prove that Jesus is real, and you have to prove that he actually did the miracles, and you have to prove that he raised from the dead, and you have to prove that there is a God for him to be the son of, and you have to prove that he's the son of that God. There's a million things here. Even if you could prove Jesus is real, your work is still cut out for you. So with this, if you could prove that the ark was there If you could prove that Sodom and Gomorrah was there and there's sulfur in the ground, if you could prove this well existed, radical. You haven't proven the other 10 billion things that the Bible says is true.
All right.
So as far as the archaeological part of it, the Noah's Ark was actually they measured it.
Well, so here's the thing. We're going to grant you. We're going to grant you that the archaeology is correct and they have found these things. How does that prove anything else in the Bible is true? Are you familiar with the genre historical fiction?
Okay, yeah, but real quick. So you're asking me a question that you should know the answer to, because you're saying, how does it prove it's real? Because it's physical evidence of it being real.
No, I'm yeah, no. So so historical fiction is fiction that uses historical places, historical people to tell an entirely fictional story. And sometimes that fiction is like Louis L'Amour is a great example of historical fiction. He uses real places and he even mentions real people, but it's entirely 100% fictional. He also did a really good book called The Walking Drum, which I think is probably the greatest example of historical fiction because it covers it almost all the way to China. But that's all. That's the best you can do is historical fiction.
Right, but let me add on to what you're saying, though. I've never heard of that person you're talking about, and there's a lot of people that haven't, and there's a reason why. It's because it's fake. The reason why a lot of people...
Louis L'Amour is one of the most famous... But again...
witnesses to it.
Again, I can go and point out where there are dozens, if not hundreds of witnesses to a gunfight that never happened. What does that mean in a historical fiction book? A book that combines both history and fiction. What does it mean that there are witnesses?
Yeah. The Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter, that movie that came out, I think it was a book too. It had all the actual events of Abe Lincoln's presidency. Does that mean that vampires are real? Everybody's heard of Abe Lincoln.
No.
Does that prove for vampires?
But we know vampires aren't real.
How do you know? It's right there in the book about Abraham Lincoln. It says it.
Yeah.
Yeah. But that wasn't the story in the beginning of Abraham Lincoln. That was never the beginning of Abraham Lincoln. It wasn't ever about vampires.
It's the secret records. It's the secret records because the government covered it all up.
The Bible was also not all assembled at once either. The Bible was put together over a long period of time, was over several decades, even a couple of centuries for some of it. Like, it wasn't the original story either. There was a whole council about what to put in and what to leave out. How can you say that this is proof of anything?
Well, because I was referring to the physical evidence of it, of the different locations.
Right. But what I'm saying is that the physical evidence, first of all, again, can't stress this enough. Those are not true things. Those are bullshit lies. But even if they were real, if you proved for sure that there was a big ass boat that specifically was what it said in the Bible would be, that doesn't prove anything about a flood. Maybe they just built a fucking boat. That doesn't prove anything about Jesus raising from the dead. It doesn't prove anything about Adam and Eve. It doesn't prove anything about the Tower of Babel. None of the other things are proved by the existence of a big ass boat in the desert. That doesn't do anything for us. You have physical evidence of one claim, not of the whole thing.
So then why are the measurements exactly what they measured then?
Because they wrote it down and they put it in the storybook, dude. Why does Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter have the actual dates of Abe Lincoln's presidency? Because that's a thing that happened and they wrote it down. And then they made a story about it. Right. Somebody built a big ass boat. They wrote down how big the boat was. And then they were like, and then they put two of every animal on there and they didn't eat each other somehow. And that's the story.
So thousands of years ago, so why would millions of people make up a story for what? What would be their purpose? And everybody.
Now we're on the so
why would somebody?
We wanted to come back to this, and now we have. Now's a good time for it. I want to ask you a question.
Yeah.
What do you think is the best explanation for the fact that the Bible is believed by millions of people all over the world? Do you think that it's more likely that millions of people believe in the Bible because it is true? Or do you think that it's more likely that millions of people believe in the Bible because it became the official state-mandated religion of Rome and then the official state-mandated religion of other places like England, and that colonization happened across the world and people demolished other cultures, deliberately committed genocide, exterminated people, forced them to convert to Christianity on pain of torture and death. And now, because of that history, which we have a huge amount of documentation of, we now have a bunch of Christians in the world because their parents were Christian and raised them to be Christian. Which one of those makes more sense?
Well, so basically, the thing that but here's what I'm trying to say, though. People have actually twisted the original word, and
that's not an answer to the question.
You're not answering my question. You said that millions of people believe in this Bible. Millions of people believe that it's real.
Yeah.
I'm asking you, is it more reasonable to say that millions of people believe in it because it's true, or is it more reasonable to say that the documented history that we have of people coming across the world and forcing people to convert to Christianity or be tortured to death, do you think that has more to do with it than the actual historicity of the Bible?
I hear your question, but you have to understand too, though, that Christians and people that believed in God were martyred and they were killed for their belief, though, too.
For sure they were.
It goes
but
both
I
ways.
guarantee
it goes both ways,
compare
man.
the list
That's
of
the
people
thing.
who died because they believe in God and the people who died because they were put to death for not believing in God. I can tell you for sure that second list is longer. So yes, lots of people have died for your religion.
How do you know that? How do you know that? Were you there? Were you there?
Because we have historical documentation of it, dude.
Were you there?
I have things that I would have died for as well. That doesn't mean that they're necessarily true. It means that I believe in them sincerely. So yes, people sincerely believed in your religion. Nobody's arguing that. But also, your religion was forced upon millions of people. People were murdered for not believing in a religion. People were tortured for not believing in a religion. The Crusades happened. The Inquisition happened. Manifest Destiny happened. Lots of things happened that forced people to believe this. So yeah, some people did sincerely believe it. Radical. But do you really think that's the actual main reason that it spread?
I think it could be a little of both. But the thing is, though,
very small smidge of one and a whole bunch of the other.
Wait, have you ever considered that the reason why there was crusaders and people like that is because they were being attacked for their religion first? Have you ever considered that?
No, that's not really even on topic.
That's not what the evidence shows. There's no reason to believe that because that's not what the evidence shows.
A man's evidence?
Yeah, the historical written records of the people at that time. The Pope who went out and said, if you kill enough heretics, you get to heaven no matter what you do. You have absolution. And especially also, if you murder a lot of women and children, you get to go to heaven. That probably has more to do with it.
Well, I'm going to bring up, sorry to interrupt, but I'm going to bring up that last guy you were talking to. The one guy the guy that's with you there was talking about how God, you're forced to believe or else you're going to go to hell. But the thing is the Bible makes it really clear that people have their own free will. Right now, we're all breathing and we're living life, and we have our own free will. It's not
except for when we don't, because in the Bible there are several times when God takes away someone's free will to force them to do things that they will be punished for later.
Yeah,
right. When the Pharaoh had the Jews held prisoner as slaves, and then he says several times over the book of Exodus, the Pharaoh wanted to let the Jews go, but God hardened his heart so that he wouldn't let them go. And then God did another plague. So God just forcefully hardened his heart and made him not do something compassionate so that he could show his dick and make more plagues happen.
Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. So if you were going to do something because you knew the end plan was greater and that you were going to have life in the end instead of death, what would you choose? Would you die to have a better life, eternal life, or would you die so you could go to hell? Would you rather go to hell?
Pascal's wager.
Yeah, that's
and we've already answered that question.
That's the first call that we took.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some problems with Pascal's wager, right? The first is you need to prove that your God is the correct God, because if the correct gods are any other pantheon, then my understanding is the Norse pantheons and the Egyptian pantheons don't care if you believe them or not. So not believing in them doesn't do anything for us. But also, what happens if the real God is a perverse God, and he will only reward people who don't believe in any God, including him?
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. What if that is the real God?
So you still are left with proving that your God is the correct God. And then you need to prove that his way is correct and that he's worthy of worship. And we've already addressed the fact that your God is a narcissistic abuser at best and a serious monster at worst, and therefore not worthy of worship. So you still have all of your evidence to go, and you've got a lot of work to go before you can convince myself, or I believe Forrest, I don't want to put words in his mouth, that your God exists and that he's worthy of worship.
Not to mention the fact that if this God is real and all-knowing and all-powerful, do you really think you're going to fucking pull the wool over his eyes and be like, well, I technically believed, so you have to reward me? Like, no, that sucks. Not like this. It's just, there's so many things wrong with that, like that statement that makes no sense at all.
Okay, but the things in the Bible were prophesied and they happen today. Don't you see what people are doing, how people act?
Yeah, there's lots of other religions that have lots of other prophecies that they claim happen today.
Like what? More clear than the Bible?
Okay, so let's play a game then. What is the best? What's the most convincing prophecy in the Bible that is coming true today that you can point us to?
Well, there is a lot of them, but it would be the fact that people have turned to people have turned to be lovers of themselves and to false idols.
Okay.
And
now
that's
I want you to tell me. I want you to tell me one time in the entire history of civilization over the past 2,000 years since the Bible was written when you couldn't have said that.
What was the question again?
What is one time over the entire last 2,000 years since the time of Jesus, the entire history here that you have 2,000 years to work with, when is one time when you could not say that, look, people are starting to love themselves and false idols and things like that? When could you not have said what you just said as a fulfilled prophecy any time in the last 2,000 years?
Well, it started in biblical times.
Right. No, that's what I'm saying. Yes. Yeah. So at any time between the Bible being written and now, you could have said, look, the prophecy's coming true. So that's a shit prophecy, right? If it's any time between 2,000 years, maybe also 2,000 years in the future, we can say the exact same thing and it means the exact same thing. That's a shitty prophecy. If I tell you I have a prophecy that someday someone will eat a sandwich, can you now point to any random dude and say, he's eating a sandwich, the prophecy's true? Or is that just shit that happens all the time anyway?
That's a simple topic you're bringing up, though. That's something that people do
and so day. Is people worshiping themselves and idols. It's a simple topic that always happens.
But it wasn't like that at first.
Can say that. Prove it. Prove it. Where's your evidence that people didn't used to do that?
Well, obviously I wasn't there, so I wouldn't know exactly. But
and you also weren't there when a minute ago I said the Crusades happened and the Spanish Inquisition happened, and you said you weren't there. So why does that work for you but not for me?
And you weren't there when Jesus Christ was walking around.
That's true. You weren't there for Jesus.
So how do you know it's true? You didn't see it. I mean, come on. If you're going to use that argument, be consistent.
Where do you think you came from? How'd you get here?
My parents.
Who was your creator?
My parents had sex.
Where'd your parents? Yeah. Where'd your parents come from?
They also had parents, surprisingly enough. Are you asking where life came from or where humans came from? Where are you trying to go here?
Yeah, exactly. Where life come from?
Abiogenesis?
So don't try to don't try to say we're like an animal. Don't try to say we're like an animal because that's not true. We didn't come from.
It is.
You don't think that humans are animals?
No, animals are on a whole different level. They have a different mind. They don't do what humans do.
We move too much to be plants, and we're too big to be bacteria. So what are we, if not animals?
We have.
Do you know what the definition of an animal is?
What's that?
The definition of an animal
human
is a living thing, an organism that is usually motile, lacks cell walls, is heterotrophic. Those are all things that humans are, it turns out. So I actually am a biologist with multiple degrees in biology, and I specifically study evolution. So yeah, evolution is real.
I have a question for you. Okay, I have a really good question.
I'm sure this won't be a straw man at all.
Monkeys. If we came from monkeys, why are there still monkeys? Why is there? You came from monkeys.
Sorry, hold on. No, I just have to ask you, man. If you came from your parents, how do you still have a brother?
No, it doesn't make sense. How is it? No, I asked you a question. Can you answer it? If we came from a monkey and we evolved into something greater than a monkey, why is there still monkeys? Why is there still chimpanzees?
I have to ask.
And why are we
I have
people?
to ask. Greg, or James, sorry, I apologize. I have Greg over here on the other side. James, I'm going to ask you a sincere question. I mean this. I really genuinely do. I'm not trying to fuck with you. Are you being serious right now?
You didn't answer my question.
I promise I will. I just need to understand who I'm talking to. Are you fucking with me, or do you genuinely think that that's a serious question about evolution?
That's a very serious question that you seem like you don't have the answer to.
No, I promise I do. I just wanted to know how to handle this, because if you're being serious, then I'm going to handle it totally differently. I'm actually going to explain it. But I need you to understand first that is a remarkably simple question about evolution, and it shows me, and I don't mean this to be offensively. I mean this, like, please understand, this sounds shitty, but you are seriously don't understand the first thing about evolution if you can answer that question. So I'm going to start from the beginning to try to make it make sense. But like, I promise you, I'm not trying to talk down to you or anything like that. I just need you to understand that is I need you, because I assume you probably heard that from somebody else. And the person who told you that was fucking you over. Like that, you need to know that. Okay.
Yeah.
That's so like, here's how it is. Okay. Here's what this actually is that the monkeys and apes and things that are around us today are not our ancestors. They are our cousins. So if you go back, say, for example, with chimpanzees, right? When we look at the fossil record, we find that our common ancestor with chimpanzees lived about 7 to 9 million years ago. That was an animal that was not a chimpanzee and was not a human. It was a totally different thing. More likely, it was an animal called Sahelanthropus, but we're kind of, but whatever. So here's this animal here. Its descendants over the next 7 million years would then branch off and become animals like humans, chimpanzees, and bonobos. So when you look at life today, all the animals and plants and everything alive today, not a single thing alive today came from anything else alive today. That's not what evolution is. That's not how it works. The definition, the actual textbook definition of evolution, is any change in the heritable characteristics of a population over multiple generations. That is something that is beyond proven, completely unquestionably proven. Now, when we look at the fossil record and we see where we as humans came from, okay? As a grad student, I studied bioanthropology, the evolution and biology of humans, okay? We have a huge fossil record, a huge amount of evidence showing where we came from. And it's not the monkeys that are around today. So when you ask what I said a minute ago, when you ask why are there still monkeys, it's as if I asked, I have a brother. If I came from my parents, then how do I have a brother? It's the exact same thing. We came from totally different animals. And now we and chimpanzees are cousins that are closely related. We share that ancestor, but we didn't come from chimpanzees. We didn't come from any of the monkeys around today. That's the answer to your question. That's what that actually is.
Okay, I hear you on that. But the thing is if we came from that monkey, the human-like creature you're talking about, then where's that creature at?
They're extinct.
No.
They went extinct. So like this is the process where you have like the whole point of evolution is selection pressure. You're meeting the requirement of your environment, right? So those animals changed over successive generations. Little by little, they changed. And some of them fit into the niche, into the little habitat of being a chimpanzee. And some of them fit better in a different niche and slowly went human-wise. And everybody before you changed. So again, just to make it clear, saying where are those animals is like saying If I came from my grandparents, why are my grandparents dead? Right? They are not me. They are a totally different group. So Sahelanthropus, the probable most likely common ancestor of humans and chimpanzees, they died millions and millions and millions of years ago. And then next thing, and to be very clear, I want to be, one thing that's kind of tough for people to wrap their heads around, but it's really important to understand, especially when you're first learning about evolution, is that the concept of species is bullshit. It's made up. There's no cut line, right? So it's not like, our ancestors, there's one species called Homo habilis. There was never a time when all of the Homo habilis gave birth to Homo erectus and then they all died, right? That didn't work that way. It's a slow change. And what we're doing is we're just drawing a line and saying, this is now what we're going to call a new species. If you had every single skeleton, if you had my skeleton, my parents, their parents, their parents, their parents, all the way back 4.5 million years to Ardipithecus ramidus, right? If you have all of these perfect skeletons lined up, there's not a single part where you can point at and say that's now a human and everything else isn't a human. That's, it just, species is a totally arbitrary box that we draw around a group of individuals in a population. We say, this is what this is.
So you think this is it? This is our you think this is our final form? What we are now, or are we going to evolve into something else?
No. Nope. Because evolution shows, like when we study evolution, it's very clear that as long as there's reproduction, there's going to be evolution. As long as you're reproducing, making more copies, there's always going to be evolution. So what happens a lot of times when people don't know a lot about evolution, when they haven't learned about it, they'll have this model in their head that we call orthogenesis. And orthogenesis literally means like upright creation is basically what it translates to. It means that evolution has a goal in mind, that humans are the most evolved thing, that we're the pinnacle of evolution. And that's not true. Evolution is not a ladder. We evolved the way we did because of the selection pressures of the environment around us. And selection pressure is just a word for saying, like, if you do this, you die. If you don't do that, you die. It's the rules of the game for living, basically. You know what I mean? So selection pressure is anything like predators, carbon dioxide concentration, access to food and water, anything that allows you to live and reproduce, right? So the reason why we evolved the way that we did, and the reason why chimpanzees evolved the way that they did, and the reason why sponges evolved the way that they did, and all these other things, is just because it fit properly into their environment. That's what we mean by survival of the fittest. It doesn't mean strongest. It means you're able to meet the requirement of the environment that you live in, like a puzzle piece fitting into place. And so we, as long as we're still reproducing, will continue to evolve. And we already see trends in our evolutionary history. We don't know what we're going to turn into next, quote, because again, that's bullshit. Species doesn't really work that way. But we already see humans are getting taller and taller because we have more consistent access to nutrition. We're getting bigger and bigger heads because we have cesarean sections and you don't have to fit a watermelon out of a cervix the size of a quarter anymore, right? And we're seeing these trends in our evolution based on the selection pressures that are still acting on us today. Differential reproductive and survival success is all that is. So yeah, this is not the end of our evolution unless we all die, and then it will be.
Well, so do you believe in the Big Bang then?
So the Big Bang is another thing that we have a huge amount of evidence proving. And I want to be very clear. Okay. That's another thing that a lot of times gets twisted up and made into bullshit. The term Big Bang was actually that word was coined as a joke. It's not like Big Bang is such a misleading. I must prefer the term everywhere stretch because that's what it actually is. There was no explosion in space that made the world. That's not what the Big Bang actually says. But you can actually, find really like the most basic evidence of this happened with this guy named Hubble. He was an astronomer and astrophysicist. And basically what happened was we're looking out in the universe around us and we see all these galaxies are moving apart from each other. And based on what we call redshifting, we can tell how fast they're moving apart from each other. And so we're like, okay, well, first of all, if they're all moving away from each other, then it stands to reason they were all in one place at one time, right? And then also we notice that the farther away they are, the faster they're expanding. And you can plot this on a line. You get this really cool slope that we call Hubble's constant. And you can plug that in, you get Hubble's law, and you can literally, like, I did a video on my YouTube channel about this if you want to watch, or even call back in next week. Well, I'll be back on the show. I'll be happy to talk about this more. I'm going on for way too long, but like, you can literally do like basic algebra and you come up with a number for the age of the universe. And the more data we collect from the galaxies around us, the more concise that number gets. And it comes out around to 13.8 billion years over and over and over and over again. And so it shows us that at one point, 13.8 billion years ago, all matter and all space would have been condensed into one point. And that is where we get this concept of a Big Bang. But again, I am grossly oversimplifying all of that. So if any of that sounds a little bit funny, feel free to call me out on it. I'll go into it next week if you want to call back.
Oh, understandable. But I mean, but you can see how, I mean, I get it. You don't believe what I believe. I respect that.
Yeah.
But you can get how, even from my view, I would think that your philosophy and what you think is nonsense though, too. You know what I mean? Based off, because it's like,
dude,
well, I mean, it's like, well, how did this all
on the
start
street?
You know,
if somebody walked up to me on the street as a child and told me about the Big Bang and evolution, I would have thought they were crazy, because it sounds like a fucking fairy tale. It does. It's mind blowing. The difference is, and this is what's really important, is that the vast preponderance of evidence supports these things. This is not just a thing where like somebody thought it was kind of a fun idea and we wrote it down and we all agreed to say it. This is something that has changed a million times. I mean, evolution, just the story of like how we came to understand what fossils are. Like the idea of extinction was fucking earth-shattering. It completely changed the world of science. And that's the same thing with evolution as a whole. Same thing with the Big Bang. Same thing. Did you know plate tectonics is a theory that was only accepted in the 1960s? There were huge debates as to whether or not to teach plate tectonics in school. But the evidence showed that that's real. And so we went with it. And that's the same thing. If you told me as a child that all the land masses on Earth are like islands floating on a sea of lava moving around, I would think that was crazy. But that's what the evidence has shown us. And again and again and again, the evidence comes back the same way. Evolution, the Big Bang, all these things, they have a million chances to be wrong, and they keep coming back right. And so this is not a philosophy or a belief system. This is the only philosophy here is that I follow the evidence wherever it leads, no matter what, even if I don't like it. And the evidence shows that these things are real. That's why I became a scientist. I wanted to know what was real, and I didn't want to be baffled by bullshit. And so that's what science is all about.
All right. And when we ask theists like you to provide evidence for things like souls, for resurrection, for any supernatural claim, whether you're, doesn't matter what type of theist you are, we ask for evidence for supernatural claims, and we get things that are at best unexplained so far, right? When you ask us how abiogenesis works or how any of these things work, we can actually show you the mechanisms and the methods and the evidence to do it. And that's all we're asking for, is the same courtesy. Show us the experiment that shows that prayer works. Because Mayo Clinic and a theist organization, I forget which one, or a Christian organization,
Templeton Foundation, I believe.
Templeton Foundation, have both done separate studies on the intervention of prayer on medical outcomes and have shown that it's no better than the rate of chance, which means it has no effect whatsoever. Prayer has no effect on medical outcomes of people.
It actually sometimes has a worse outcome. If people know they're being prayed for and they don't get better, they feel bad, and it actually makes them sicker.
Yeah.
Kind of weird.
Yeah. So, and that's just to say that in this one case, right, medical intervention, prayer doesn't work. That's not to say that prayer doesn't work everywhere, but at least show us the evidence for that. Show us what that is. And if prayer doesn't work because those people aren't Christian enough, prove that. If there's something they're doing wrong in their prayer, show us that. Right. So even the fact that the statistics don't show it doesn't mean that prayer doesn't work. It just means that all the ways that those people were praying weren't working.
Right. That's a whole other claim now. Yeah. So like that's what we were talking about at the beginning. We were talking about things in the Bible. Even if you could prove this one part of the Bible, you still have to prove the rest of it. And that's the same thing with me. Like I can, like, abiogenesis is what we've talked about a few times. Abiogenesis is life coming from non-life. That's the process that life starts, right? Obviously, we've never seen that happen. We've never once like looked at the common creationist thing that I hear a lot is like open a jar of peanut butter and find new life or whatever like that. So like we've never seen life come from non-life, but we have proven over and over that all of the building blocks of life can form by totally natural processes all on their own, and they don't need any kind of intervention. And we've shown that they're able to combine all on their own without any intervention. And we're shown that life itself, as it's working, is just following basic laws of physics and chemistry and doesn't need any intervention. And so we can put those pieces together and come up with the idea that it's more than likely that life can start by itself. And until we see evidence that there is something creating life, we have no reason to think that that thing exists. You know what I mean? So like, that's the whole thing, man, is that like with science and with evidence, like you don't have to watch something happen to know it's true. It's just like a murder trial. I don't want to go to a murder trial and have somebody say, well, I didn't see him murder somebody, so I guess it didn't happen. We can say, oh, here's footprints and here's fingerprints and here's a motive and here's a video and here's the evidence builds up and shows us what's up. And so that's all that this is all about. When we talk about all these scientific principles, like it's not just a wild guess or a worldview. It's something that we actually have a reason to believe in.
Right. And even if you could prove every natural occurrence in the Bible is true, you're still left with all the supernatural elements that still need to be proven.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And that still needs to be proven. And that's what we're asking evidence for, is for that supernatural.
Yeah. And we've been talking for a long time, James. What do you think about all that? Do you have anything? Because we're way over time. So like, do you have any thoughts on everything that we just said? Any final questions for us?
Well, just like everybody consider, it makes more sense to believe, we're all going to die. So, it's like, makes more sense to believe. Wouldn't you rather believe you're going to go somewhere greater than you're just going to go in the ground and be nothing? I mean,
follow-up question on that. Does it matter?
You know what I mean?
Does it matter what you believe, or does it matter what's real? Does it matter what you believe, or does it matter what's real? That's my question.
They both matter.
Right, but like at the end of the day, would you rather believe something that's true or something that's not? Does it matter to you that your beliefs are true? Is I guess the question.
I would rather die believing that I'm going to go somewhere good eternally than die and just go in the ground and be a nothing.
So even if heaven wasn't real, and even if there is no God, and even if you do die and go in the ground and there's nothing, you'd rather just assume that something else is real because it's just nicer?
Wouldn't you?
No.
That is actually the fundamental difference between our beliefs.
Right.
Is that I would rather believe something is true even if it's painful.
And the reason for me is that I would be very afraid of being turned into a monster. I'd be very, very afraid of not treating the LGBTQIA community with the empathy they deserve because they're human beings. I would be worried about making judgments about people that are not based on reality and who they are, and simply what they believe or not. And there are a number of other things that we can go into on another call because we are way over time.
Yeah, sorry, I've been rambling for a while.
No,
and that's commands were pretty simple, and people, they didn't obey them, and that's where we are. You know what I mean? So,
I'll tell you,
God's commands aren't that simple.
Yeah, that's a whole other rabbit hole.
They weren't supposed to be hard. They weren't supposed to be hard.
Would you like to, if you want to go into more of this, like we've got to end because we got people waiting on us, but like, would you be cool with calling in next week as well? Because I'm going to be in the studio live next week. I'd love to hash out a little bit more of that with you.
I'll tell you what, you give me a call. How's that?
I don't think I can. We don't have a call out feature.
Yeah, but, we don't call out. Sorry.
If you don't want to, it's okay.
Yeah. Oh, that's all right. Hey, it was nice talking to you, and you guys take care, all right? Be well.
All right, you too.
Take care, James.
Thanks.
See you later, man.
Bye.
And I can also say, unironically, although I don't know I'm supposed to, but like, I have a whole ass YouTube channel dedicated to tearing apart creationist claims from a biological standpoint. It is spicy and mean sometimes, so it may not be up everybody's alley. But